5 bad cards that broke Hearthstone. The first on this list, an absolutely garbage, terrible, horrible pack filler that became good, is Wretched Tiller. This card, very simple. It is a 1-mana 1/1 that when it attacks, deals 2 damage to the enemy's face. I think it's pretty self-explanatory why this card was terrible. It's a 1-mana 1/1 that only does something if it attacks, and when you are attacking with it, it's a 1/1. Like it's bad stats. It doesn't really do anything. Like sure, maybe you can go face with it and get some attack, but at that point you're just better off with a Leper Gnome, unless you can get like many attacks. But if you're getting many attacks, you're losing out on the 1 attack every time from just having a Leper Gnome instead anyway. And it's really not all that good. So what happened that made this horrible pack filler eventually become good? Well, Hysteria was printed. You may be wondering how on earth a 4-mana board clear that can be played in Warlock and Priest helped Wretched Tiller become broken. Well, for that we'd have to look at the patch notes and see what Hysteria used to look like when it was released. You see, Hysteria was released not only a mana cheaper at 3 mana, but it also read, choose a minion, it attacks until it dies. So you could choose any minion, your side of the board or their side of the board, and it would attack until it died or had no other minions to attack. So what you'd do is you could bind Wretched Tiller with a card that made Wretched Tiller immune and Hysteria it, and it will attack everything on the board, dealing 1 damage to everything it attacks, but dealing 2 to the face until the opponent's face explodes. Either you'd make sure that there's 15 health and minions on the board if you need to deal 30 to the opponent, like half of what the health the opponent has, or if you wanted to play this in Priest instead of Warlock, which was the best way to play it. The best way to play this deck was to put it in Warlock, use a Dark Glare Shell, because Dark Glare at the time costs 2 mana. You'd have all the really strong Crystallizer Dark Glare shenaniganry, which is an easy way to flood out health if you were going to use 1 attack with your Tiller and you needed things to die to be able to kill your opponent's face. Or the less good version, but a way you could do it without having to worry about the board as much, is use in Priest, and you could use something like Shrinkmeister to make it so that Wretched Tiller has 0 attack instead of 1. Then when it attacks, it doesn't actually kill the thing that it's attacking. So all you have to do is have Wretched Tiller in like the 2/4 in play that made Wretched Tiller immune, and it would just keep attacking the 2/4 until the opponent exploded. That was it. That was the whole deck. That was the whole combo. You just Wretched Tiller, make it immune, Hysteria it, and have it kill the opponent, assuming there was enough minions in play, and if there weren't, assuming it had 0 attack. That was it. That was the whole combo. It was pretty good. This card was quickly dealt with, not by itself being touched, but by Hysteria quickly being nerfed, which then put this back to being a horrible, no good, very bad pack filler card. But it was certainly really funny to see Wretched Tiller, a card that had been long forgotten, hiding amongst uncommon cards in your collection that see no play, to see it have its moment in the sun. This next card on the list, perhaps the most influential to have this effect in all of Hearthstone history, is Naga Sea Witch. For those who don't know, Naga Sea Witch is an 8-mana 5/5 that makes your minions cost 5. How on earth was this anything but terrible? Well, much like in the last one, we have to look at what this card looked like when it was released. When it was a problem child, it was a 5-mana 5/5. Even that, you'd wonder, how is this anything but bad? Well, they made a rule change to try to make Hearthstone more intuitive across the board. And what they did was they made it so that static effects like this one that set something to 5, and I might get the terms wrong, but they made it so that what this would work is it would set something to 5, and then if that card had a cost reduction already on it, it would then go below 5. Before this change, if this card was in play, everything cost 5, even if it was a card that was supposed to cost less if something happened or was done. It would just set itself to 5 and it would override any other reductions. They changed it so that this sets its base cost to 5 and then any reductions get applied after. Where this is particularly broken and why it particularly became a problem is with giants. Things like Mountain Giant that cost 1 less for every card in your hand. You put Naga Sea Witch in play, suddenly the card costs 5 minus the amount of cards in your hand, which made it really easy to play Mountain Giant for 0 mana. Next up, also from Classic, Molten Giant. Instead of needing, 10 health or less to be able to play this card for 0, you just had to make it cost 5 and then have 25 health or less, because that reduces it by 5, which makes it 0. You also have things like Clockwork Giant. As long as your opponent now only has to have 5 cards in their hand, this card is free. The only limit to the amount of giants that you could play with Naga Sea Witch was the amount in your hand. It could be 1 or it could be 4. as you can see, you play a 5-mana 5/5, you play a bunch of free 8/8s. It ain't like it is today, right? I mean, today you can theoretically make a board bigger than this earlier, and like it just isn't good. You just get cleared because there's removal tools and draw tools. But back then, this was just would end the game on the spot. Like in this image here, the hunter faces 3 8/8s and a 5/5 and can do absolutely nothing but just die immediately on turn 6. This was the first of its kind where a card just was so absolutely bonkers, and specifically it was terrible before it became bonkers, that it's super fitting to be on this list. I also said earlier that this is the most impactful card historically that's ever done this. And what I meant by that wasn't that it's the strongest we've ever seen or the strongest relative to its time. You could maybe argue that, but that's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is this created a community event like we've never seen before. This created an uproar like always. Well, they took this so far that a user even took out Reddit ads. They paid money to Reddit to advertise about this problem, which is just hilarious. They spent real world money that they could have spent on packs to advertise on the Hearthstone subreddit that this was happening and that this was a problem, to try to raise attention to it to get it dealt with, which is just hilarious thinking about today. You know, today we could just like at ridiculous hat and have the exact same, if not better effect. But back then, back then you were dropping money on Reddit ads, baby. Absolutely hilarious. There's actually still Reddit posts you can find about this, both about the Reddit ad, about the effects, and a lot of the comments of sympathy from way back in the day. If only they'd know that 9 years later, things like this still happened. Our third wonderful little guy that went from 0 to hero is the most relevant currently, and that is Princess Huhuran. This card being good is hilarious for a lot of reasons. Considering that it, like, on its own has been power crept 3 times is one of them for sure, but also just the fact that it's never been playable ever until now is also really funny. This is one of those cards that you'd get or never get, and it just like was either disenchanted or just sat there doing nothing forever, which makes it perfect for this list because you either have to craft it to play it now or you get really rewarded for holding onto it. The reason this card became good now after being terrible for a while is that they printed an egg. They literally printed an egg, which was the whole point for the card originally, right? Was to activate death rattles, and the first death rattles designed in Death Rattle Hunter were eggs. But they printed a very specific egg in this instance that made it so that this card specifically over any of the cheaper, better death rattle activators was the best to play in the deck. The death rattle added a random beast from your deck to your hand that costs 5 or less and made it cost 0. So you could activate the egg with this card, which you generated by getting a copy of it from something like Stitch Tracker. You could then hit the egg with it, trigger the egg's death rattle, which could then proc on Princess Huhuran, giving you a 0 mana Princess Huhuran into your hand, which can then go on the egg, generating a 0 mana copy of Princess Huhuran forever, and so you get a full board of 6/5s. You can also do this with the Lion, which is a 5/2 that gains the death rattle and has Rush, so if you need to clear an entire board, you can play Lion on it, which will give you either a Lion or a Huhuran, but more likely to give you a Lion than a Huhuran because you run 2 Lions. You then get another Lion, put it on the egg, trade in, get another Lion, put it on the egg, trade in, and so you have a full board clear. Or with the Huhuran, you have just a full board refill, although they're kind of both board refills in some aspects if you use things like Feign Death to then generate multiple of them. As seen here, you can continuously fill your board up many times in a game, in a singular game, and just get a ton of value from this 3-card interaction without really paying any mana, and also killing anything your opponent plays for the most part. But the specific reason that Huhuran is good is that it's both a beast and costs exactly 5, so it's the most expensive you can play with egg. It activates egg, it costs 0, but cards specifically like Tundra Rhino give it charge. So if you make a board of 6 6/5s, you can then play Rhino, which you could get for free from the egg, or you could run in your ETC. You could then add the Rhino to the board, and suddenly those 6 6/5s can then go face for 36 damage. So you not only get lots of value refill, can kill anything you could ever want, but you could also use it as burst. This deck is like an absolute beauty because it makes cards like Meat Wagon, which can pull the egg out, which could be on this list, but really just isn't that exciting. It makes that card playable. It makes Princess Huhuran great, which historically has never been playable. And it's doing all of these powerful things with cards that have been around forever, but have never ever been useful ever. If you haven't learned it by now from things like Unlicensed Apothecary having its moment and all sorts of cards, you should never disenchant anything ever, because eventually you may want that card, it may find a use, and you're only going to get a fourth of what it's worth when you disenchant a card anyway. So long run, it's just bad management of your resources. So yeah, really funny. If you loved Princess Huhuran, now's your moment to shine. Pop up, play some Egg Hunter, and have a great time, because this card went from 0 to hero. The Darkness is the fourth card on our list, not to be confused with the Dankness. This card, originally theoretically designed as Highlander Disruption, right? Shuffle 3 cards into your opponent's deck, which will turn off their Reno Jackson and their Zephyrs the Great, as well as any other Highlander cards. Well, at least until they made that change where that wasn't a thing for new ones, so now you only can turn off half of the Highlander cards, which is a little confusing. But anyway, that was its purpose, was to turn off Highlander cards, and also to just be a really high statted minion if you somehow got lucky and pulled the candles early enough, or just like at all before the game was over. This card sat being a laughingstock, being a meme, sometimes used as Highlander Disruption, sometimes used just because it was funny to see people's reaction to you playing the Darkness, but for the most part being a horrible, no good, very bad pack filler. Until one day, baby, until one day. And that day was known as Switcheroo Day, because it switched up the Darkness from being horrible to being part of the greatest deck in the format. Woohoo! Alright, so what exactly happened? Darkness, 4 mana 20/20. How do we make this good? Switcheroo, what does it do? Alright, well, it draws 2 minions, it swaps their health. Oh, we've been down this road before. That's not what the card did when it was relevant. 3 mana, draw 2 minions, swap their stats. Yes, much better. So what you do, very simple. You would make a deck, make a priest deck, right? Because Switcheroo is a priest card. You would put in the Darkness into your deck. You'd put in Stone Tusk Boar into your deck. You'd fill it up with 27 other spells, and you'd call it a day. You'd play Switcheroo on 2 with the coin. You'd draw a 20/20 Stone Tusk Boar and a 1/1 Darkness, but that's not important here. You would then use that 20/20 Stone Tusk Boar, and you'd use something like Divine Spirit on it and Topsy-Turvy, and you'd make it a 40/20, or Divine Spirit and Innerfire and make it a 40/40, etc. And then you'd throw that at the opponent's face as early as they turn 3 kill. This is one of those decks that in general was inconsistent, so the actual win rate was like, I don't know, so-so. But when it happened was just obviously gross, disgusting, and nobody liked it. It was no fun because you would just die on turn 3 or 4 or 5 just with nothing you could really do besides having a taunt that they can't silence. Another reason the deck was bad, obviously, if you draw the Darkness or if you draw patches, not patches, if you draw Stone Tusk Boar. I said patches because they're both like having a patches in your deck where if you draw them, you basically just lose the game instead of it being a bad draw. It's just game over. But yeah, the deck was just literally all Innerfire Priest type cards and those 2 minions and Switcheroo, and that was it. Darkness went from being a meme to being an enabler for Stone Tusk Boar to be a 20/20 as early as turn 3, and then you had Priest cards to make it even bigger and hit your opponent in the face with. If that wasn't enough to get it done by either copying it or buffing it, tough luck. Your deck has literally nothing else besides Innerfire cards that could maybe scam with like a Potion of Madness. It was pretty funny. It was not very fun or healthy or cool, but it was pretty funny. And yeah, just another example of a card that went from 0 to something overnight. And much like all the other ones, has gone back to being 0 as quickly as it became hero. What's next? What's next on our list? Bolf Ramshield, baby. Let's go. Bolf Ramshield, baby. The first thing I want to talk about with Bolf Ramshield is there's a Toast video that came out 8 years ago where he was excited that this card finally had a use, which is fitting to describe this card as being a card that kind of looks like it could be something, but has for nearly a decade been just absolutely nothing. It was a laughingstock within an expansion that wasn't itself, from a power level perspective, kind of a laughingstock. So it's really fitting that this weird like tavern brawl interaction in this video where he's able to play Bolf plus Auchenai Soul Priest plus 0 mana Tree of Life to win the game was like the strongest use that they've ever had for Bolf. Like that 10 mana combo in a format where you could get a 0 mana Tree of Life as a priest was like the holy grail for Bolf power level. That is absolutely hilarious. Bolf, obviously, 6 mana, 3/9. Deal damage to the face? Nope, you actually dealt damage to Bolf, right? Very simple card. How do we break this? Well, it's very, very simple. We released a card that on its own was really, really good, and with Bolf was quite really, really stupid. So in this video, we see Raren here playing the card that was released, the problem child, the Jailer, in both standard and eventually wild. The way the Jailer works is simple. You destroy your deck, but you make your minions immune. So your board can't be dealt damage to. It could be removed with things like Twisting Nether or Shadowwood Ruin, untargetable clears, but you cannot physically target or deal damage to a single target in any possible way, at the sacrifice of your entire deck. What you may see coming is that if you play this card, which was just good on its own because it meant that they couldn't kill your minions and then you could kill them before you die despite taking fatigue for not having a deck. But as you can see, if you combine it with Bolf, not only are your minions immune, but Bolf is now one of your minions who who when your hero takes damage, instead deals it to Bolf. But since Bolf is one of your minions, Bolf, much like your minions, because he is a minion, is immune. So they now cannot send their minions to your minions, nor can they send their minions to your face. If they do not have a wide AoE type clear, like a Brawl or a Twisting Nether, that can deal with Bolf, they cannot win. They cannot deal damage to you. I suppose they could like Mechathune or something, but they cannot deal damage to your face at all. And all you have to do to become unkillable in this manner is play the Jailer and then live a turn and play the Bolf. And then it's a guessing game. Do they have a way to stop it? Or do you get to sit back and laugh as they realize slowly and painfully that there is absolutely nothing that they can do? That was it. That's the whole combo. That is how Bolf broke. A laughing stock for 10 years, basically, became very quickly, overnight, an hilariously great and funny, absolute chunky beast. 8 years ago, they did not find a use for Bolf, but this time around, they did. They found a use for Bolf. It had its moment in the sun. And much like any other Zero to Hero card, you don't get a refund when you craft Bolf to do this, because the other card that made it broken is often what gets nerfed. So if you held on to Bolf, you got super rewarded. If you got baited into crafting Bolf, unlucky. But that is one of the best stories of a card going from pack filler to being great. Good old Bolf Ramshield, baby. That wraps up 5 bad cards that broke Hearthstone. If you liked this video, be sure to watch some more. On the left is a video that YouTube thinks you'll really like, and on the right is my most recent video.